Well, hello, everyone. This is State Representative Kate Lipper-Garabedian. Thank you for joining me for Conversations with Kate. I'm excited today to introduce the district to my new legislative aide, Julia Germani. Good morning, Julia.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, I'm excited to have you here in person. We've already met a couple times in person, but obviously you're new to this role, and it's really lovely to welcome you for your first time to Melrose and to the district.
It's great to be here.
So for folks who obviously are getting to know you now, can you give us a little bit of a background about where you're from and maybe your educational background and some of the roles that you've held before joining the office?
Yes, of course. Okay, so again, I'm Julia Germani. I am from Northern Rhode Island, specifically Lincoln, Rhode Island. I'm the oldest of three children. I have a brother named Brett, a sister named Lauren, a mom and a dad, and perhaps most importantly, a beautiful golden retriever named Bailey. She's my favorite member of the family. I wanted to name her Senator, actually, but that was vetoed.
Okay, all right. How old is she?
She is, well, now I sound like a bad owner, I think 4.
Okay.
So we got her when I graduated high school.
Okay.
So 4, going to be 5 soon.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm. So from Lincoln, Rhode Island, I attended Northeastern University here in Boston, or a little bit away from here in Boston. And I received my bachelor's degree in political science. I also had a minor in law and public policy. Something more notable, I guess you could say, about my educational career is that I actually started college through the NUN program, which is an immersive first-year program where college freshmen actually are placed in one of 10 host countries. So I was in London, England, and I was there amid the whole Brexit situation.
Wow. Sure.
So that was a very interesting introduction to politics in a global context.
Absolutely.
Which I think is kind of full circle now that I'm working in state government. And as I'll touch on in a few minutes, I did a number of internships in federal government. So I've kind of been immersed in a few different environments.
And you're coming into the State House at a time when our policymaking is not strictly state level in some ways. As we see, there's a huge interplay right now with federal policy. And you know, you've just joined as we're finishing up our COVID-19 recovery bill, which is largely through ARPA funding, which is federal. So thinking about that relationship. And obviously a pandemic is global. So looking at how other jurisdictions and countries are handling this in terms of travel and protections. I mean, it's all interrelated. So you had a first row seat for for Brexit, and now you're having a similar sort of seat at the pandemic.
Yeah, no, it is definitely a very interesting time to be working in government. There are a lot of intersections between all 3 levels of government and global government on an array of interesting and important issues.
Right.
But going back briefly to my time at Northeastern, Northeastern is a really strong proponent of what they call experiential learning.
Yes.
And the 3 components of experiential learning in Northeastern's terms are global experience, research, and co-ops. So I was fortunate enough to complete 2 co-ops during my time at Northeastern. The first one was at actually an international law firm, but they're headquartered in Boston, and that is Foley Hoag. That was a great experience. And then my second co-op, which unfortunately was cut short due to the pandemic, but was still nonetheless a very formative experience, was at the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Mass. And then independently, I engaged in 2 internships, the first of which is probably most relevant to this current role, was for my hometown or home state senator, Jack Reed. So that was great. And then most recently, I was a law clerk at a local law firm called LaPlante Soa Goldman.
Right.
So I think that all of those experiences were super formative in leading me to where I am right now.
Yes. And it's been really interesting. Obviously, I've gotten to hear some of those different roles and experiences from you, and I'm sure we'll talk more about them as time goes on. I loved hearing about your internship, at the U.S. Capitol and navigating the underground tunnels. I remember that tram because I once interned there as well.
Oh,
yeah.
Who did you intern for?
So I worked at at the time it was the House Committee on Education and Labor.
Mm-hmm.
This was I mean I'm dating myself, maybe 15 years ago or so now.
Help is what
yes,
they call
exactly. And then that was when it was the Democrats were the majority party for the House. When the Republicans took over, they changed the name of the committee a little bit, but it was really neat. I got to sort of prepare for some of the different hearings and do bios on the witnesses, and also then support the different members by developing a daily news sort of email that sort of flagged different headlines that they might want to take a closer look at. And it was just really fascinating to get to be in some of the conversations about bills that were being developed. I remember one on literacy, and so I'm sure you also, just by virtue of being there, got a real sense of the organization and the work of it, but also got to navigate some of these tricky buildings. Although our own State House, as we've seen together, is like a maze in and of itself. So.
Yes, I will be braving the State House later today.
That's right. I wish you well, because I can't give you a map at this point. So you mentioned sort of your global experience, your internships. You want to talk briefly just about the research component of Northeastern? I think it's a really great emphasis on these three different, pillars of work.
Yeah, sure, of course. So at Northeastern, you can do formal research with a professor. A lot of people, or I shouldn't say a lot of people, a fair amount of people do that instead of a co-op, because you only have to complete one of the experiential learning requirements in order to graduate. But many do all three, as I did. Mine was a little bit more informal. So the first the first research opportunity that I engaged in was earlier this year for my senior capstone / senior thesis. I think it's just called something different depending on where you go. And I did mine on the role of deceptive interrogation techniques in false confessions as that relates to wrongful convictions.
Just one of my mother's books, she's an author, she wrote for newspapers, was about Earl Washington Jr., who was a man who came within a week or so of execution in Virginia for a crime he didn't commit. And he was basically convicted solely on the basis of his coerced confession, but he was very mentally delayed, had real significant disabilities. So I'd be happy to lend you the book. You might find it really interesting based on your research. Yeah.
Thank you for offering.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that this issue is relatively new in terms of awareness surrounding it, because, the practice of deception rests on a very antiquated understanding of human psychology. And I think that in the course of my research, when I was looking into why people might be opposed to banning the practice of deception, people would repeatedly say, well, why would someone why would somebody confess to a crime that they did not commit? And the evidence surrounding modern studies on this topic suggests that deceptive interrogation tactics are effective in securing confessions from the guilty, but they are also effective in securing confessions from the innocent. So action does need to be taken surrounding this issue. And I think is either 2 or 3 states, I think Illinois and Oregon that I know of have passed legislation regarding minors and the developmentally delayed regarding deception bans, and there is legislation pending in New York State.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to see how that develops in the coming years.
Well, it'll be interesting to talk to you more about that, because you work for a state legislator now.
Yes.
So it's possible that we can explore that, as you've seen in some of the emails that I've been copying you on now to constituents. More than 6,000 bills were filed to start this legislative season or session. Hundreds more have been filed since. As a single legislator, we can't know every bill that's been filed. So, you and I can now look into this topic a little bit more and learn I'll learn from you. We can learn together about what colleagues are thinking about on this topic.
That sounds great.
So tell the listeners a little bit about what then. I think it's sort of intuitive from the description of your past professional practices, why you would be interested in working at the State House, but do you want to just touch a little bit on why you applied and what you're most looking forward to in serving as an aide to the 32nd Middlesex District?
Yeah, sure. So as I noted previously, a lot of my public service has been at the federal level, in fact, all of it. And in my courses as a political science major, a lot of the topics that we discussed were at the federal level. So discussing federal legislation and the federal courts, things of that nature. And I think that was actually, it was very informative, but it was also a disservice in the sense that they underplayed the importance of state governments to a certain extent. So I was really excited when I got this position because I think it's a great opportunity to learn more about the processes, procedures, and intricacies of state government. And while my federal government experience was very enjoyable and very interesting, I think that there is a unique opportunity at the state level to more so engage directly with constituents. And I think not always, but in a lot of cases, you're able to kind of see things through to the end and see the results, which is a very rewarding.
Right. No, it's definitely
very
true.
Rewarding thing.
Yeah.
And as you touched upon earlier, we're seeing a lot of intersections between federal, state, and even local governments. There's a lot of important key issues being thrown back to the states right now. So being able to play a role in that is very exciting to me.
Yes. And I'm glad that, I think the passion for both the policy and the people is probably what drives most people into public service. And certainly in any role, you can have a complement of both of those things. I think the closer to the ground you are, it's definitely the case that you have a better sense of the individual stories and experiences that can inform the policymaking that you do. And so I've really loved having the opportunity to experience that interplay. So I'm glad to have you on board and supporting the district and the office in that role.
Yes, I'm definitely looking forward to serving and learning more about the 32nd Middlesex District.
So after this, we'll go maybe do a walk downtown and you can take a look at how lovely Melrose is. And so, over time, people will certainly see you on social media or copied on my emails, but people can reach out to you directly at julia.germani@mahouse.gov with questions. They can call our office, obviously, and talk to you as well. And I know that you have some career goals in mind, so you're going to be working with us, for quite a bit. And then what are you thinking about longer term?
Yeah, so I'm hoping to attend law school. I'm planning to attend law school to matriculate in the fall of 2023.
Okay.
And I hope to stay on until then. I've always wanted to be a lawyer. I have a few lawyers in my family. It's just a very interesting profession to me intellectually, but then also just as a helping profession. I think it's a great vehicle to help others. So I will be studying for the LSAT come January.
Right. Yes. I wish you well. I went through that myself. Yeah.
Not my favorite test, but it has to be done.
That's right.
So I'm planning on attending law school. And then one of my research interests that I didn't touch upon, but I can talk about now is privacy in the digital age. I think in a lot of different contexts, both in the private sector, with regard to businesses' privacy and consumer privacy, the laws are very outdated.
Absolutely.
In light of modern technological advancement, but then also in the public sector in the context of the Fourth Amendment and criminal investigations. So I would say that is definitely one of my main interests in law, though there are many. So I'm not sure exactly which area of law I will decide to pursue, but I would imagine that I will be steered in a more clear direction based on my experiences in law school. So I'm looking forward to that.
Absolutely. And, I was so thrilled to hear about your interest in digital privacy and that, the challenges of sort of grappling with a totally new framework of ways in which we interact as humans at a time when our laws haven't been updated. So as you know, I'm a lead sponsor on the Student and Educator Data Privacy Act, which is a key priority for me this year. I'm really hopeful that we'll get something through this session to update our state law framework to recognize, which it currently does not, that the vast majority of student data now is digital. And we should reflect that in our laws and be thinking really critically about how it's used appropriately to advance and improve educational experiences for kids, but also ensure that their privacy and their security is paramount. So I'm glad to have somebody else on board who's really keen on those issues and thinking about ways so that we can strategically move that bill forward.
Yes.
So with our remaining time, maybe you can share with us, a little bit about you're just wrapping up your first week.
Yes.
By the time people listen to this, so you'll be a few weeks in, but it'll still be quite new. Any quick impressions or things that you've been working on to just kind of give people a sense of some of your portfolio?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, my first impression is that it is an incredibly busy office, but being busy generally means that you're being very productive. So that's a good thing.
Sure.
But thus far, as you said, it's only my first week. So I've just largely been familiarizing myself with the softwares and your different committee placements. So just trying to play an active listening role.
Yes.
To hopefully be able to contribute in the coming weeks.
I think you will, certainly. And thinking about things that you're familiar with, we're heading into a holiday season. Any things you're looking most forward to in terms of your traditions and, any New Year's resolutions at this point?
Yeah. So firstly, what I'm most looking forward to about the holiday season, I consider myself a foodie, is my mom's, what is the term? It's not a steak. It's maybe like a prime rib or something like that. But it is so good, and it is my favorite holiday meal. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
Excellent.
My family has Christmas Eve and Christmas at my house, so it'll be nice to see family and friends, especially after such a period of social isolation in light of the pandemic.
That's great.
Yeah. And then in terms of a New Year's resolution, I don't have anything explicit, but I was talking to Diana the other day.
Our legislative fellow, yep.
About some things I've been trying to be more intentional about. And I think this also relates back to the pandemic. And my friend gave me this suggestion, and I thought it was a good one. Is trying to reframe my thinking to be more positive just in all aspects of my life. And so one of the phrases that she recommended myself, but also just generally people adopt, is when you find yourself saying, I have to do X, you say, I get to do X.
That's a nice one.
Yes. And it's actually, I've started to try to do it more, and it's been very helpful. And the reason I say that it relates back to the pandemic is because there are a lot of things I think that we took for granted in pre-COVID life, like being able to go into the office and other things. Things like that.
Right.
So instead of I have to commute an hour tomorrow, I get to go into the State House.
That's really a nice way to look at it. And I know you're also hopefully not going to be commuting that level of distance for too long. We're going to get you back in the state soon, right? Before we turn to that, I also, my mother similarly said she started to try to use the word but, B-U-T, less. Yeah. It's not, it's sort of, instead it's like an and. And I've tried to embrace that as well, because I've noticed it doesn't have to be this oppositional sort of framing of concepts. It can be and this and that. So I've appreciated, and I'll keep in mind this one too. I get to do something moving forward. So I think you're planning to move back to Massachusetts now that you've secured this job. That means your commute will be a lot less. It also means that, as you start to think about law schools and where to apply, I would argue, Massachusetts has some very good ones, and maybe Rhode Island has one or two, but, once again, this is a way in which Massachusetts is clearly superior to Rhode Island. What are your favorite things about Massachusetts and your less favorite things about Rhode Island? Any sense of the state rivalry?
Okay. Yeah. So I don't have a super strong opinion.
Okay.
One thing that I will say Rhode Island was a great place to grow up. One good thing that I always say about Rhode Island is within an hour you can be in the suburbs, the city, and the beach. So everything is very close by, and you get a little bit of everything. And it's a very beautiful state, the ocean state.
Yeah.
But I do associate Massachusetts, largely with my independence in adulthood, because I began college there. So it does hold a very special place in my heart. I really love the city. And similarly to Rhode Island, there are a lot of different terrain. So that's interesting. Yeah. I'll definitely be applying to most, if not all, of the law schools in Massachusetts.
Perfect.
So
see, you started your college career here. Now you're starting your professional career here. We expect that we'll keep you here for law school and beyond. And I will admit, and I think this is public knowledge, that my family does go to the Rhode Island beaches every summer. So I will concede that you do have lovely beaches. But but we're glad to have you in Massachusetts. I'm really thrilled to get to have you joining the office. I'm just excited for all the work we're going to be able to do for the district, for Melrose, for Wakefield, for Malden, and for the Commonwealth with your time here. So thank you so much for joining me and for joining Conversations with Kate.
Thank you for having me.
All
Looking
right.
forward to working together.